So sometimes politics can be quite stressful. The last couple of days that I have felt incredibly stressed, that when I woke up, the colour of my hair changed. And the effects stress can have on you is pretty profound. But enough about me. Let's dive in. So Parliament, we know, is an absolute shambles, all because of political games from the Labour Party. Now, the latest excuse for Lindsay Hoyle selecting Labour's amendment for debate when it shouldn't have was because of safety. Apparently, having more motions tabled would somehow mean MPs are protected. I don't really understand the logic here. Of course, it is a load of rubbish. We know that Labour's amendment was tabled because Keir Starmer didn't want to have a rebellion on his hands, where a pretty big chunk of Labour MPs would have voted with the SNP. But to weaponise abuse and safety is, I think, absolutely disgusting. Now, shamefully, the media has ran with this line. Instead of doing actual journalism and calling this out, the media, to the surprise of no one, are targeting Islamist extremists because, of course, there were hundreds of thousands of Islamist extremists who marched in solidarity with Palestine and being against a genocide. Well, that's now extreme. It's clear the media and our politicians are using Islamophobic dog whistles. I mean, they don't really mean extremists, do they? I mean, it's the same old playbook with a slightly new cover. People need to understand that race or religious groups don't have a monopoly on violence. David Amess, okay, was killed by a legit Islamist extremist. But in 2016, Joe Cox was murdered by someone from the far right. Yet the media only want to focus on one, which is Islamists. When do you hear in the media about the danger of the white right-wing man? The threat of far-right neo-Nazis or fascists, despite these groups statistically are more likely to act violently or cause disruption. Out of all the protests since October 7th, the hundreds of thousands of people who turned out, there was largely little incident. But the only time when it kicked off was, and it was a brawl, was 500 or so far-right thugs attacking the police, attacking others, protecting the cenotaph from literally no one. But the media rarely talks about them. And it's not Islamist, it's actually Muslims or those who care about Palestinians. The media are simply using a dog whistle to conflate all Muslims with the extremists, and they will reshape the definition to suit their needs. So sometimes they will conflate hundreds of thousands of people who marched for a ceasefire, who are diverse, white, black, brown, young, old, anti-Zionist Jews, atheists, and they'll lump them into the box of the Islamist extremist mob or Hamas supporters. I mean, some protests hit north of over 500,000 people. If we were to realistically look at the numbers, there's probably more than 1 million people in this country who are politically active on this issue. So does that mean we have 1 million terrorists? I mean, if we had 1 million terrorists in this country, this nation would cease to exist. I mean, if a few thousand IDF personnel can literally flatten Gaza, then what could 1 million terrorists do over here? Of course, it's just a load of crap. MPs are in very little danger. Of course, what happened to David Amess and Joe Cox was terrible and frightening, but it's an incredibly rare incident. And I think MPs are weaponizing this issue. There was no mob. It was just ordinary people who care, who are trying to participate in the political process. It's normal for people to watch debates in Parliament. It's normal to lobby your MPs to get them to vote a certain way. But they don't want accountability and are using safety as a way to avoid it. Now, one particular egregious example was Paul Sweeney, and he tweeted this. The Glasgow constituency office of Labour MSPs was stormed by protesters this afternoon, terrifying and threatening staff. Staff who are working to help Glasgow constituents. Thanks to Police Scotland for ensuring their safety. The Speaker is right to try to calm this down. Well, it turns out he's full of it. This video footage you're looking at now, these are the so-called mob, which they don't really look very mobbish, do they? It's just a bunch of pensioners peacefully holding signs. And of course the police were called, but the police themselves confirms there was no incident. But this is what MPs mean by abuse. Unless you're overly paranoid, then a handful of people peacefully holding signs is nothing to be scared about. But they want to ban this legitimate form of political expression because, look, the MPs continually vote against our interests, continually screw us over. And they know that, so they want to do that in peace. These people think they have a God-given right to govern when they work for us, or they're supposed to work for us. Now, Lindsay Hoyle came up with the most ridiculous remark when trying to explain why he selected Labour's amendment. Honestly, you won't believe this. He said it was because he wanted to stop another terrorist attack. What an utterly insane thing to say. I mean, that is dangerous to proclaim on TV in front of the Commons. There is no evidence. This is instilling fear on people. You know, our politicians in a time of crisis where emotions are high should be showing leadership. You know, should be being calm and trying to calm the nation. But instead they lean into the fear for their own political goals. Now, we now know for sure that Labour's amendment was selected because of pressure from Keir Starmer and nothing to do with safety. I mean, here it is straight from the horse's mouth himself.
I can categorically tell you that I did not threaten the Speaker in any way whatsoever. I simply urged him to ensure that we had the broadest possible debate.
And your MPs?
Broadest possible debate, so that actually the most important thing, which is what do we do about the awful situation in Gaza, could be properly discussed by MPs with a number of options in front of them. That's the right thing to do. The Speaker did the right thing in making sure the debate was broad.
Of course, Starmer denied blackmailing or coercing Hoyle. Of course he's going to say that, but I don't believe him, and you shouldn't believe him either. Look at it this way. Are we expected to believe that Hoyle would have risked his position to break from parliamentary precedent, risk causing a crisis in the Commons, risk pissing off the SNP, other parties, and the government after a light request from Starmer? Of course not. I mean, it's incredibly obvious he was made to do it. Why would he do it otherwise? Why would he take the risk? It makes no sense. Now, I want to point out how dangerous all of this is, not just for Islamophobia, but let's be honest, that is British politics' standard modus operandi. But the gap between our political institutions and ordinary people is increasingly widening, even though the gap wasn't particularly small to begin with. But MPs will try to make it harder for ordinary people to participate. Too often, MPs cry foul at abuse when they're just being asked fair questions or because of mean tweets. Look, if you're an MP and you get called a melt or a twat on Twitter, then just don't be a twat or a melt. Yet these people say nothing of Apsama Begum, nothing of Diane Abbott, especially Diane Abbott, receiving horrific racist abuse. That doesn't matter because they're women of colour on the left. But even still, as bad as that is, none of that is an excuse to implement authoritarian measures. Now, threats of violence and racist abuse should never be tolerated. But receiving emails saying you have blood on your hands for backing a genocide, as crass as that is not abuse. That is a legitimate political point. When the death toll in Palestine right now is 30,000, I'm sorry, but spare me the bullshit of MPs' tears trying to make it about themselves. People are angry, and they are angry for a reason. But rather than address the anger, whether that be people's material conditions or unethical foreign policy, people in power turn around and gaslight ordinary people with zero introspection. It is important that we call out the entire British establishment in all of this. This isn't about extremists. This is about stripping away our rights and avoiding democratic accountability. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like and drop a comment. It's good for the algorithm, and I'm interested in what you have to say. If you're not already subscribed, please do, and hit the notification bell. You can also support this channel by becoming a member for 99p per month. And if you're feeling a little more generous, then you can support us on Patreon for £3 or £5 per month. This channel for a while has been uploading every single day, and it's quite a lot of work that is still voluntary and scheduled around my paid work. But I have so much ambition, expect in the future to see more variety in content, such as interviews and Vox Pops. But I want this to be a fully fledged media organisation where not only is this my full-time job, but to have multiple people working for Turn Left. I like to see a live show in the future, more content that delves into culture, history, and much more. But that can only be done if there's money. So please, if you can, support us in any way that's in your capacity. And thank you to existing members, subscribers, and patrons. See you next time.